Scythians, the ancient nomads of Eurasia, who had world-class fashion, so much jewelry that they literally had a golden man, and were also allegedly the first ones to use cannabis recreationally. These steppe nomad warriors were also popular for having fierce women figures such as Queen Cimmerians and the legends of Amazonians. The common belief is that all Scythians were speakers of Indo-Iranian languages and were purely West Eurasian in their appearance, which would make them look similar to modern-day Scandinavians, and as a result, this is how many recreational AI artists draw them. People also believe that Scythian heritage survived solely in Ossetians, through Ossetians being descendants of Alans. However, how true is that notion? Let's evaluate it through linguistic and genetic data that is currently available to us. First of all, Scythians is an umbrella term for Iron Age steppe nomadic populations from Hungary all the way to Mongolia. There isn't any evidence for a singular Scythian identity or estate. What is also added to the common Scythian characteristic is what is called the animal style, which is simply an art style that originated before the time of Scythian within a mostly East Eurasian deerstone complex culture around Altai and West Mongolia. Keep the deerstone culture in mind, as it will be relevant slightly later. Grouping all the numerous nomadic tribes of the steppe into one ethnic and cultural identity is dubious because for one steppe, confederations were often diverse ethnically, and uniting them solely based on their art style would be similar to if, when 1,000 years later the humans currently living today were to be excavated, and the remains that were found to have an iPhone in the pockets of their pants would be grouped together into one ethnic identity of iPhone culture, which is obviously absurd. In terms of language, we face a problem as well. The Indo-European linguistic designation of the entire Scythian world isn't based on any text Scythians themselves left. Rather, it is based on loose personal names, idioms, and names of tribes recorded by ancient Greeks, Assyrians, and Persians. This is problematic because, as we know in the modern world now, many people have names which originated within an ethnic group different from their own. Additionally, those foreign transcriptions could have only possibly recorded names and idioms from the tribes of Scythians neighboring them. Considering the location of ancient Greek, Persian, and Assyrian cultural sphere, they could have only come into contact with a limited number of Scythian tribes. It would be next to impossible for ancient Greeks, Assyrians, or Persians to come into contact with, say, Scythians of the Pazyryk or Tagar cultures located in Altai and southern Siberia. While as of now, the only evidence of Scythian language that we do have does point to Indo-Iranian classification, that would potentially not apply to all tribes known as Scythians. It is also strange that in the Wikipedia article, the classification of all Scythian languages is written in confidence as Indo-Iranian. Yet the first work cited on the page regarding their classification, which is cited from a renowned linguist Alexander Lubatsky, states that, unfortunately, we know next to nothing about the Scythian of that period, referring to Old Iranian era. We have only a couple of personal and tribal names in Greek and Persian sources at our disposal, and cannot even determine with any degree of certainty whether it was a single language. When we refer to the original source, we see even more uncertainty even regarding even Sarmatian and Alanic languages, as Lubatsky poses great doubt on even those later languages, since all evidence is restricted to simply personal names. Therefore, it is quite interesting that the wiki page article classifies Scythian languages so convincingly as Indo-Iranian, yet the first academic work quoted on this expresses nothing but doubt. This leads us to the area where we have the most data regarding Scythians, DNA science. We will be looking at both Y DNA haplogroups and autosomal DNA data. What separates Scythians from earlier nomadic cultures of the steppe, such as Andronovo and Sintashta cultures, is the presence of East Eurasian admixture. Many mistakenly assume that it comes with Sarmatian conquests, going from west to east and mixing with East Eurasian women. However, this is wrong, due to Sarmatians being one of the most recent and younger Scythian cultures. First, we would like to give a correct chronology of discovered Scythian cultures and their locations. Currently, the most ancient Scythian, or rather Scythian-related culture that we have, Cimmerians, which are dated 1000 to 800 BC, and were excavated from Moldova and Ukraine. Although they were excavated in Europe, it is documented that they were a wave of a migration of nomads from the steppes of Asia, and that their origin likely corresponds to eastern Kazakhstan or the Altai-Sayan region, as stated by Barry Cunliffe in Scythians, Nomad Warriors of the Steppe. What was also stated in Barry Cunliffe's work is that one of the influences on Cimmerians' testing of the inner Asian origin is a strong material influence from the Altai, Arjan, and Karasuk cultures from Central Asia and Siberia, visible in the Chernogorovka-Novocherkassk complex. Of inner Asian origin were especially dagger and arrowhead types, horse gear such as bits with stirrup-shaped terminals, deer stone-like carved stelae, and animal-style art. This was also corroborated by Esther Jacobson's work, The Art of the Scythians, the interpenetration of cultures at the edge of the Hellenic world, that states the Chernogorovka-Novocherkassk complex thus developed natively in the North Pontic region over the course of the 9th to mid-7th centuries BC from elements which had earlier arrived from Central Asia, due to which it itself exhibited similarities with the other early nomadic cultures of the Eurasian steppe and forest steppe, which existed before the 7th century BC, such as the Arjan culture, so that these various pre-Scythian early nomadic cultures were thus part of a unified Arjan-Chernogorovka cultural layer originating from Central Asia, which shows that the Scythians originated eastwards, and their expansion was east to west and not vice versa. When analyzing their DNA, we see that in terms of autosomal DNA, they average around 25% of East Eurasian admixture, with most of it being related to Kovsgol, late Bronze Age ancestry, shown here as Baikal hunter-gatherer. This admixture is also seen in their Y DNA as one of the 3 remains carried Q101 haplogroup. We will remind viewers that while Q1b subclades were found in Sintashta culture and seem to have blended with Proto-Indo-Iranian nomads early, Q1A1 lineages are associated with Americas, Siberia, and East Asia instead, meaning that this lineage could not have been the lineage that came along with the initial Indo-European nomads, and must have entered the Cimmerian gene pool, somewhere around Siberia and Altai area. The second oldest Scythian remains that we have are those of Kazakhstan Sakas, also labeled as Tasmola Sakas. They are dated 800 to 600 BC. Here, we see even more East Eurasian autosomal admixture, averaging out to be around 40%, also mainly of Baikal source. We also have much more information about those remains in terms of their skin, hair, and eye color. Looking at their Y DNA, the first sample is JL620. Unfortunately, this haplogroup isn't narrowed down enough to infer something useful and more than likely stems from BMAC culture further south. Then we have 6 samples of R1AY P1548. We can see that descendants of this specific branch of R1A are found almost exclusively in modern Kyrgyz, and with single samples being found in an Altaian, Han Chinese, Turkish, and a Bulgarian man. All of these locations would be consistent with Turkic migrations. You will see why we're mentioning Turkic migrations later on. Then we have 4 samples of R1AY P1455, which is ancestral to YP1548 discussed earlier. Currently the only modern carriers of related subclades before it becomes YP1548 are found in a Tatar, Han Chinese, Anatolian Turk, and a Portuguese person. Next, interestingly, we have a sample of C2. This is important because it shows C2's early arrival in the steppes of Kazakhstan way before medieval Mongols' invasions. C2 is thought to have arrived in the central steppe from the Amur region and would definitely be of East Eurasian origin. Lineages descending from CY 10,418 are currently found in Anatolian Turks, Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, Han Chinese, Tatars, and a Karachay and a Czech person, once again all within the realm of Turkic migrations. To be fair and impartial, the QYP 4000 haplogroup in this case, however, seems to be of Q1b variety, and the subclades descending from this branch are currently found in Western Eurasian populations such as the French, Ossetians, and Chechens. So here we do see a higher proliferation of R1 of paternal lineages, but we also see an increased East Eurasian autosomal admixture, as well as presence of C2 Sakas, being 40% of East Eurasian admixture would not look like some Scandinavians, as we can see from their physical feature analysis. Vast majority of 22 Saka samples had an intermediate skin color, with only 2 individuals being pale and 1 being very pale, and 4 individuals having dark skin. Vast majority also either had jet black or dark brown hair, with only 3 individuals being blonde, and most had brown eyes, with only 5 individuals having blue eyes. We also have some academic facial reconstructions of Saka, who definitely do not resemble Northern Europeans, but rather groups like modern Bashkirs. It is also extremely strange that this Twitter account that reposted this reconstruction felt the need to add they were Eastern Iranian people, with no evidence backing that whatsoever and refusing to elaborate further. Amazing, as we currently have no remnants of the Tasmola Saka language. There is only evidence of Khotanese Saka language being East Iranic. However, Khotanese Saka are 1,000 years younger than Tasmola Sakas, have a much higher Iranian or Zagros Neolithic farmer admixture, which means that they're far from being the same exact people as Tasmola Sakas. The next oldest Scythian burial, known as Aldi Bel in modern-day Tuva, is dated 800 to 700 BC and is the contemporary of Kazakhstan Sakas, and is the second phase of the 3-phase Uyuk culture. According to Genetic Kinship and Admixture in Iron Age Scytho-Siberians, published by Human Genetics Journal, here we see that out of 16 male remains, 9 had haplogroup R, 1Z, 93 characteristic of Eastern Scythians and preceding Andronovo culture, and the other 7 males had haplogroups QL54 and NM231, which are more commonly found in East Eurasian populations around South Siberia and Mongolia. This article also states that it also appears that the group analyzed shared a greater genetic link with Asian populations than Western Scythians did. Note that this culture is more to the east than Tasmola Sakas and is essentially at a crossroads where the Deerstone culture existed as well. The maternal haplogroups that were studied were also roughly half of West Eurasian origin and half East Eurasian origin, dispelling the myth that it was a purely West Eurasian population that conquered an East Eurasian population and mixed with their women, as that would be indicated by the admixture being purely of West Eurasian paternal lineages and mostly East Eurasian maternal lineages. However, that is not the case in Aldi Bel, as we see that both paternal and maternal lineages in Aldi Bel culture are of mixed origins. This work also found that significant paternal genetic differences were found between the Eastern Scythians and the Scythians of the Pontic-Caspian steppe. The 2 groups were of completely different paternal origins, with almost no paternal gene flow between them. On the other hand, there is strong evidence of shared maternal DNA between Scythian cultures, indicating maternal gene flow from East Eurasia to West Eurasia. This shows that paternally East Scythians and West Scythians were different people. We also have this reconstruction of an Arzan Scythian, which is the oldest phase of the Uyuk culture, even older than Aldi Bel, done by Ancestral Whispers. Please take into account that these type of AI reconstructions aren't as accurate as the professional academic reconstructions. It should also be noted that this account did not specify that this is one of the oldest Scythian remains available in their post, leaving their viewers clueless, as they also mostly reconstruct Tian Shakas, who came later than both Tasmola Sakas and Arzan Scythians, and are significantly admixed with an Iranian Neolithic farmers. This seems to be done in order to confuse readers into thinking that the Tian Shan Sakas are more ancient than the Siberian Scythians, prompting some to leave fully ignorant comments such as this. We're sure that this account knows the chronology of different Scythian burials, but isn't mentioning this for a reason. We also have professional academic reconstructions in the Aldi Bel phase. Both look racially admixed, with the male resembling populations, like Tatars and Bashkirs, and the female resembling a Kazakh or a Kyrgyz woman. Neither of them look like Germans or Russians or Scandinavians. Now let's look at Sarmatians, the people who are commonly but erroneously thought to be the original Scythians. First of all, Sarmatians are often documented as a hybrid group that arose between admixture of more eastern Scythians and Sarmatians. Sarmatians being a distinct nomadic group who arose out of Srubnaya culture and who were pure West Eurasians, as mentioned in the Metal Road of the Eastern Eurasian Steppe. The formation of the Xiongnu. They were then subdued by Scythian nomads coming from Central Asia, and the hybridization of the two created Sarmatians, as stated by the Golden Deer of Eurasia. This is evident in the fact that Sarmatians have East Eurasian admixture, but it is less than that of the original Scythian groups coming from the east and ranges between 2.5 and 8%, which would prove that Sarmatians had to have been a purely West Eurasian population. Also, the earliest Sarmatian burial is dated to be between 500 BC and 320 AD, which is a huge range and which is definitely more recent than the Eastern Scythian burials and the Cimmerian burial. When analyzing paternal lineages of Sarmatians, we get the following picture. In the oldest Sarmatian burial, along with R1, lineages we find R1b lineages previously not observed in any of the older Eastern Scythian lineages. R1b lineages make up the majority of the lineages of that burial, along with some R1a lineages as well. Q lineages are not present in this burial. In the next oldest Sarmatian burial that has available Y DNA and is dated 1 AD to 100 AD, aside from R1 lineages, we find a lineage of Q called Q-YP771, which is closely related to Q-L332, previously found in Uyuk culture mentioned, and also related to Q-BZ181 lineage found in Deerstone complex burial. This shows that there was indeed a flow of paternal lineages from the east to the west, but not vice versa, as no R1b lineages were found in any of the original Eastern Scythians. The final Sarmatian burial that we have comes much later in AD 400 to 500. It is excavated in Hungary and has a completely different genetic profile not only from Eastern Scythians, but from previous Sarmatians itself. It has much lower Iranian Neolithic, East Eurasian, and Eastern European hunter-gatherer ancestry than previous Sarmatian burials, lacks any R1a, R1b, or Q lineages whatsoever, and is the only Scythian culture whose closest modern genetic populations are Central Europeans. It is a clearly highly admixed and assimilated culture which can be modeled as only partly Sarmatian in its DNA and being mostly of Celtic and Balkan genetic makeup. We will finally also look at the Alans, who are descendants of Sarmatians and thought to be the ancestors of Ossetians, which gives the claim that the only surviving descendants of Scythians are Ossetians. Interestingly enough, while Alans do have one R lineage and one Q lineage each, they also had 4 remains that bore haplogroup G, 2 more consistent with origin in the Caucasus, and their overall genetic profile is much more Caucasus shifted than previous Sarmatian burials. They can be modeled as only having between 25 and 33% of Sarmatian admixture, and the rest being of local North Caucasus admixture. Autosomally, the closest modern population to them are Chechens, and the QBY 45596 lineage found in Alans is also currently only observed in Chechens, while the RF 1117 5-star lineage is observed in Chechens and Western Europeans, possibly arriving there through later Alan migrations to Europe and alliance with Vandals. This leaves us with the fact that the standard view of Scythians is skewed in the majority of people, partly due to the fact that a lot of new burials and information came out relatively recently, so the public didn't have enough time to adjust to new information, but partly also due to the politicization of their origin for various reasons. Considering the fact that all oldest Scythians burials are concentrated more east around the area of Altai and central Kazakhstan, have significant East Eurasian admixture, found both paternally and maternally, and the fact that Scythians were known for animal style brings us to this conclusion. Animal style was first observed in Deerstone Kirigsur complex. Deerstone complex is currently hypothesized as either a Proto-Yeniseian culture or a Proto-Turkic culture, though both aren't confirmed. This burial predates all Scythian and the Cimmerian burial. and is dated around 1400 to 970 BC. It is mostly East Eurasian in its autosomal profile, being only around 15% West Eurasian due to ancient North Eurasian admixture and Y DNA lineages found in this complex, such as RZ93, QL54, and QL330, are also found in later and early Scythians, Cimmerian, and Uyuk cultures, leading to the conclusion that Scythians, at their core, probably arose from the union of two cultures of Andronovo and Deerstone complex, with Andronovo culture increasing West Eurasian admixture and Deerstone being the source for East Eurasian admixture, as well as the iconic animal style popularized by the Scythians across the steppe later on. This leaves Sarmatians as a separate group that arose after the original Eastern Scythians did and came about from the mixture of Sarmatians descending from Shrubnaya culture and Eastern Scythians, which indicates that Scythians expanded from east to west and not the other way around. This also positions Alans as being of minor original Scythian ancestry, being that they themselves are Sarmatians mixed with North Caucasians, and Sarmatians themselves are mixed. Finally, DNA studies such as ancestry and demography and descendants of Iron Age nomads of the Eurasian steppe states that contemporary descendants of Western Scythian groups are found among various groups in the Caucasus and Central Asia, while similarities to Eastern Scythian are found to be more widespread, but almost exclusively among Turkic language-speaking, formerly nomadic groups, particularly from the Kipchak branch of Turkic languages, therefore confirming that Scythians did not leave their ancestry to modern Europeans in a major way, both autosomally or paternally, as majority of Y DNA subclades found in Scythian remains are currently mostly found in Turkic, Iranic, and Caucasian people and not Europeans. We are not stating that Scythians spoke Turkic. Rather, we are stating that there is no linguistic evidence when it comes to original Old Scythian groups in Altai and South Siberia who have significant East Eurasian admixture. Also, we're stating that different Scythian groups weren't a racial monolith and could have vastly different admixtures and paternal lineages. Most of the public's perception regarding Scythians is actually that of Sarmatians, who are themselves distinct, diverse, and more recent than the earliest Eastern Scythians, and that there is only small evidence of Sarmatians, Western Scythian groups, and possibly Tian Shan Sakas, who have Iranian Neolithic farmer admixture speaking Indo-Iranian, and no evidence at all as to what language Scythians of Uyuk or Pazyryk culture spoke. Finally, it is incorrect for modern Europeans and white Americans to regard Scythians as their ancestors, as paternally and autosomally Eastern Scythians left their ancestry to Turkic peoples, while Western Scythians left it to Central Asians, both Iranic and Turkic, and people of the North Caucasus.